All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the Boca Podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Holritz. Happy Friday to those of you that may be live streaming with us. Appreciate you being here. And as you do join the show in the live stream, please don't be shy. I know I always say it, but I don't know how many of you actually take me seriously. Comment, question, ask. Yeah, I mean, you can send us funny emojis. You can make jokes if you want to. Just join the conversation. It's part of the benefit of this live stream is you get to be part of the show. You can ask me questions. You can comment on your experience around the topic that we're discussing. You can ask our guests questions or comment on what they're saying. Be part of the show. Make it a live thing. We'd love to have you as part of the show and part of the conversation. And I have to go ahead and pop this up. Sue is consistently here and part of the show. She says hi from Sun Valley. Hey, Sue. Thanks for chiming in. Sue also happens to be a pilot. I learned this a little while ago. I think it's kind of cool. A photographer and a pilot. But just like Sue did, say hello. Let us know where you're listening from. Again, ask questions. We're getting into a really important topic, which I'll intro here along with our guests just a second. Of course, this show is produced by Photographers Edit, custom editing for the wedding and portrait photographer. And for those of you who are in the middle of busy season right now, and you've just got an overwhelming amount of editing, let us help you. It's time to let some of that busy work go. It's not making you any extra money. It's not giving you freedom and flexibility as a business owner. Let us help. You can go spend time with the important people in your lives this weekend. You can go watch some Netflix. And for that matter, you could go actually do something in your business, like more shoots or marketing efforts that will actually make you more money. And we can handle that busy work for you. So give us a shot, photographersedit.com. And that's all the marketing, all the promotion I will do for today. On that note, I want to go ahead and introduce our, it's actually a return guest is here. Clark Sanders is here with me. Clark, thanks for coming back to the show. I appreciate it.
Hey, you're welcome. It's an honor to be here again.
Well, and you were super gracious to come and be part of the show again. And I say gracious because today we're going to be doing another brand position consultation. We've done a very large number of these on the show, and I hope to continue to do a bunch more. I think there's a lot of significance to this topic, and unfortunately, it's very much under discussed in our industry. But the reason I say you're gracious, Clark, is we're kind of opening up your business and discussing it in detail. And I know that takes a little bit of guts, maybe extreme, but just a willingness to be able to kind of share and be transparent and a bit vulnerable. I really appreciate your willingness to do this. And I hope, number one, that you take some value from it. And then for those of you listening in and watching, the Brand Position Consult is meant not only to help our guests, but then also to give you some insight into what brand position even means, its significance in helping you grow your business, and then ultimately how to go about establishing a clear and distinct brand position. And we'll get into that in more detail here in just a little bit. For those of you who don't know Clark, Clark Sanders, photography.com, just like it sounds. Clark, I have to say, like with some business names, they either get really long or somebody has a hard name to spell or they're getting too creative with their business name. You make it super easy. ClarkSandersPhotography.com and then Clark Sanders on Instagram. And of course, we'll link to both of these in the show notes at bocapodcast.com. All right. Well, let's just jump in, Clark, because there's a lot to cover here. Maybe we could just start with the definition of a brand position, because this is something that is, I mean, have you heard this topic discussed a whole lot in the industry, Clark, yourself?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've learned, most people will think, what a brand. They think a brand as a logo, and it's way more than just a logo.
That's it. Yeah. And we were talking a little bit about that before we got started. There is plenty of valuable information out there that photographers and photography educators are putting into the market about brand. Certainly as it relates to logo, thinking about the mission and the vibe, to borrow a bit more commonplace word these days, that we want to communicate to our clients. And that's good. We want them to feel something. But at the end of the day, they have a need to be met or a problem to be solved. And I think a more important question that we need to be asking, as much as we are as artist types and photographers kind of touchy-feely, I'm a super emotional guy. Like I want you to say something or do something that resonates with my heart. But at the end of the day, if you can tell me in 2 or 3 seconds what makes you different and how you're going to make my life better as a result of it, you're going to have me sold that much quicker on buying your service, you or any other photographer or any business for that matter. And so that's kind of what we're going to get into today. And the idea of a brand position very simply is a value proposition. I think that phrase is used a little bit more commonly in business. Value prop I have a problem. I need wedding photography. Are you going to provide that service? Well, you've now provided me value. That's the value proposition, is you are providing wedding photography to me. Or in your case, Clark, you're providing senior photography for my kids. That is the value proposition. So a brand position, I think a good brand position and brand position statement communicates not just a value proposition, but a unique value proposition. And this is a tough one, but it's also where the value of a good brand position is. There are a lot of photographers around us, and they're all kind of saying the same thing. If we look at photographers' websites, you could say you're a senior photographer, but then there are 5,000 other photographers saying that they're senior photographers. So that's a value proposition, but it's not a unique one. Why do I want to go to Clark? If word of mouth marketing is a whole different conversation. That's a different thing because somebody's referring them. They're like, you've got to use Clark. That's one thing. But if somebody lands on your site or your social media and they're like, okay, he's a senior photographer, why should I use him? You've got to be able to succinctly communicate not just the value proposition, but a distinct or unique value proposition to that potential market or to that potential client. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool. And I'm asking you, but I'm also kind of putting it out there, of course, for the audience at large too, not to minimize anything that you might already know about this, but just to be clear for everybody too, the significance of brand position. You might say, Nate, okay, I hear what you're saying. I understand value proposition. I understand what you're saying about the significance of brand position. Really, the kind of 4 benefits or 5 benefits really of a clear and distinct brand position. I'll just read this off really quick for everybody. Enables your business to stand out amidst the masses. There are a lot of photographers these days. Certainly there's plenty of business to go around, but it's harder to stand out amidst so many photographers. So it allows us to stand out amidst the masses. It enables potential clients to immediately know that unique value proposition. That's number 2. Number 3, it filters irrelevant potential clients. If they land on our site, if somebody lands on my photography site and it says black and white wedding photography for Chattanooga skateboarders, that's super specific brand position statement, and they're going to immediately know whether or not they're a good fit or not. And they'll go away if they're not, and that's fine because I'm trying to reach a particular segment of the marketplace. So it filters irrelevant potential clients. That's number 3. 4, it simplifies and focuses marketing efforts. If we are any and everything, then there's any and all possibility of marketing messages that we could be putting out there, and that whole marketing effort becomes a bit convoluted. If we have a very clear and distinct brand position, and I'll keep using this as an example, if I am a black and white wedding photographer for Chattanooga skateboarders, my marketing message is super focused and everything centers around that. It makes it so much easier to market it. So it simplifies, focuses marketing efforts. And the number 5, it encourages better time management because again, I'm not juggling 68 different messages and genres and possibilities. I am hyper-focused on this particular position and position statement. So those are the benefits. All right. So I just want to kind of give that intro, Clark. Let's talk about you. What are the top, say, 1 to 3 reasons why you started and run a photography business in the first place?
I've always had an interest in photography. I'll date myself because I still have old photo albums from when I used a little 110 film camera and took pictures of our cats playing in our backyard. And it's like some of the pictures I go through now, it's like, why did I take that? Why do I have that? But it just grew from that. And when I was in high school, my dad was the school administrator and also did some of the photography for our yearbooks then. And he had a dark room, had to develop the film. It was a total manual process. There were no computers then. I did a little black and white photography there and learned a little bit in the dark room. If I was to go into dark room today, I would not have a clue what to do. It's been so long, but that all piqued my interest. And then we've got a family friend that has another friend that had a photography business in Louisiana. And I saw some of his work and I thought, that's next level. What I was doing was with a little camera, the light. I was just drawn in by the lighting and the posing and everything. I thought, I want my pictures to look like that. And that kind of got the ball rolling for me to do what I'm doing now, which took me a while to go at it full time because I had a secure job, a paycheck coming in, but I really wanted to do this as my full-time career, but I was just too scared.
I get that.
After a lot of encouragement from a lot of people and taking their advice, I made that happen. So that's been uh, basically a dream come true. That's not to sound cliche, but
Not at all. No, and I mean,
so.
I love just the kind of the simplicity, the purity of you like photography. It made you
Hmm.
curious, made you excited, and you're like, you know what, I want to do this too as
Hmm.
a profession. And I totally get that. When I think back to when I started in wedding photography, 2001 is when I at least it began to pique my interest. And I was kind
Hmm.
of I was a hobbyist with my 35 millimeter camera at the time and taking
Hmm.
pictures. And my partner at the time put together a portfolio for me. And I was just excited about all this stuff. I was, of course, taking pictures of flowers and some fancy double
Hmm.
exposures and like, oh, this is cool. And a
Yeah.
friend or somebody that I worked with actually saw that portfolio and they were like, they told their friends who were getting married about me and they hired
Hmm.
me to shoot that first wedding. But it just started with a
Right.
general interest in it, which
Hmm.
is, it's just fun.
Yeah. That was same with me. I mean, like you, where you say 2001, and that's when I jokingly say when I started taking money from people for doing this.
Yeah.
And that was, I mean, I started out with, I shot film and I'd send it off, have it developed, and I'd have to wait a week to find out if I got anything halfway decent. And it just grew from there. And at that time, between then and the time I'm doing it now, the market was not near as saturated as it is now.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, people knew I did what I did and they liked it. So, but it's definitely changed
It
a
has.
lot since
And
then.
and the biggest thing is, I mean, just the ease of which we can get into the market as photographers now is, of course, driven by technology. It is so
Hmm.
much easier to do so.
All right.
And rather than, I know that maybe some of the more traditional photographers or established photographers that have been comfortable where they're at might complain about that, or certainly have in the past. Rather than complaining about it and looking at it as a negative, it's a change in the industry and the market, of development technology. How do we adapt to that? And to be
Hmm.
clear, this is only a piece of the puzzle, but having a clear and distinct brand position statement, which we can easily communicate in our marketing efforts, is a piece of that puzzle and an important one at
Hmm.
that. And so, of course, that's why we're talking about this today. Just to give a tiny bit more context to everybody listening in, too. When we talk about a brand position consultation, and Clark is going to give more context to this here shortly, but what I'm here to do is help Clark think about what his brand position might be, or if he has any semblance of one at this point, how you might be able to further clarify it. And the goal is to at least have some good food for thought in that effort. And if we happen to come up with one or two possibilities that he can take away from this, that's wonderful as well. I also want everybody listening in and watching to be able to understand first, again, what brand position is and then how to go about developing that. And so hopefully listening into this conversation will be helpful. And the last thing is I'm asking Clark these questions to get context. Because if we just blindly, a lot of times what happens is photographers will think of these creative, cute phrases to put on the front page of their website that frankly don't mean a whole lot to their potential clients. It sounds cute and pretty and creative and artistic to us as photographers, just doesn't carry a lot of significance to the potential client. So I'm asking Clark questions here to get context about how he sees business, how he does business, what he's doing in business, so that I can help give him a bit better set of suggestions that might help him in establishing a clear and distinct brand position. So I just wanted to add that bit of context. Clark, I'll keep going. What
Okay.
market are you currently based in?
Well, the physical location, I'm in a little town in north central Arkansas called Highland, Arkansas. And it's small, but we have several small towns around here that make up a larger population. The city we actually live in the population is about 2,000, which is actually the largest city in our county. And
When I
but
when
we
I was
have,
doing some research for our conversation, I actually messaged you, but I was looking at the town Highland on Google Maps, and I kept expanding, just looking for a bigger city outside of it. I kept expanding. It was just green, like not green, 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 green. There weren't any big
right.
cities like super close to you.
Right. They're not. But I mean, I always joke we have enough population in this area to have a Walmart supercenter, so
Okay.
it's like things like that. But a lot of I have clients from around here in the surrounding towns. But I've had, like we had in our conversation, I've had clients come from as far as Little Rock, which is about 2.5 to 3 hours from here.
Hmm.
I've had them come from over in other states coming to me, and they found me a lot of times they found me from word of mouth. Like I had one of my clients from Little Rock had come to me because this photographer they use there had done pageant headshots for her daughter, and she had a son graduating, and he's a avid hunter, and they wanted outdoor portraits of him hunting. in the duck blinds and the water and all this kind of stuff. Well, this headshot photographer didn't do that. And she followed me and knew that I did that. So I got a referral from her. And now that client that I photographed her son, I have another client from that same area calling me for that. So it's nice. Plus they know what I charge and it wasn't an issue. So whenever they refer people and talk about it, it's kind of like they're automatically, it's not going to be an issue as far as price goes.
You mentioned, we discussed this briefly yesterday, and I'm glad that you brought it up just now. This is something for those photographers that are listening in or watching, and they're like, well, I get most of my business via word of mouth, so I'm not really so concerned about certain words that I put on my website because I'm just getting referred. Like this client, they like what I do. They tell somebody else about it. They come to me, and most of my business comes from word of mouth referrals. Clark, you said you're in a similar position there. And what I would say to you and to anybody listening in who has that word of mouth business is, number one, I get it. Two, awesome. Keep it up. Like, you're obviously doing a really great thing. The fact that people want to keep talking about you and referring you. But then three, where this still carries some significance is that we know that in business tends to kind of fluctuate, right? It ebbs and flows, and it comes from different places. The last thing that we want to do is put all our eggs in one basket. And so by making sure that we've got a kind of a foolproof system in place for brand position statement, and even associated with that, we'll talk a little bit about SEO today as well, just so that we have that additional source or stream of potential clients, whether they're searching for us in Google or they're finding us on social media. I think it's important to at least maintain some level of presence online that is clear and distinct and ultimately helps us with SEO. So I wanted to mention that. The other thing I'll say for everybody listening in, if you've not seen Clark's work, you absolutely need to do it. Clark is very unassuming personality, but his work speaks loudly for itself and is just stunning. I've got it pulled up here. If you go to clarksandersphotography.com, you can see this. But Clark, your work, I have to say, I mean, it's objectively just beautiful. It's technically proficient, certainly, especially when it comes to the lighting. But it's just really, really nicely done. So for those of you that haven't seen clarksandersphotography.com and Clark Sanders on Instagram as well, make sure that you check that out. So let me just keep the conversation going then. So you're based in Highland, Arkansas, but you're working in surrounding areas, and you have clients coming in from surrounding areas as well.
Right.
What type of photography, and I know I alluded to it already, but just I want it out of your mouth, what type of photography do you normally tell clients or potential clients you specialize in?
Well, like I guess my elevator pitch, you would say, is I primarily photograph high school seniors, but I also do corporate headshots. A lot of my income this year has come from several banks from towns that have been about an hour from here. And so I've done that. And then during the summer, someone described the photography business, depending on what you photograph, it's either feast or famine, which I totally get that. A lot of times my summertime, when you would think most people would want to do senior portraits, is kind of slow. But we have, like a lot of places do, little baseball leagues, summer baseball leagues, and we have fall football leagues and things like that. So I'll do some of those sports teams as well, which it's not the biggest source of income for me, but it is supplemental there. So and it's fun. But I told my wife, said if there was something that I would like to let go of, it would be that. Interesting. I don't mind it. I enjoy it. But it's not as good of a creative outlet for me as doing high school seniors and also business headshots. Those are quick and easy, but there's times some of those businesses want more than just one headshot. They want, something more creative they can use in their advertising and such. So, but that's mainly what I do right there.
Okay, yeah, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. So okay. You get some supplemental income from the sports photography and then headshots. I get that. Right. Senior photography seems to be kind of the driving brand representation at this point. Certainly on your website and
that's
on Instagram.
I learned a long time ago, show what you want to sell. So if you go to my website, you're seeing that. I have people ask me, do you do weddings? And I'm like, nope. It depends on the client. I actually have a wedding booked for next year, but it was for a client we there are were our local veterinarian here. They retired. I've done pictures for their family for years, and I've known their daughters for years, and so it was one of those situations where I can't say no. You know,
Well,
so.
to be clear, as much as I harp on focusing on one particular genre and then niching down within that genre, it's not that there aren't businesses that have made a go at multiple genres and have done very well at it. In fact, the last
Mhm.
podcast, Boca Podcast episode we did with Simon Yao, we talked about to niche or not to niche. And Simon, what he ended up doing was creating two separate brands, which I think if you're going to be in multiple genres, I think it's the smart way to go because it helps
Mhm.
minimize potential confusion from clients, at the very least, and how they position you in their minds. We talk about brand position and having a clear and distinct value proposition to speak to the marketplace. But part of brand position is how potential clients or how the market positions us in their mind. When they think about Clark
Mhm.
Sanders photography, what's the first thing that comes to their mind? If you're doing your job right, it's what you want them to be thinking, but that is part of brand position. You have to think about that a little bit. So
Mhm.
if when they think about Clark Sanders photography, they just think photographer. And I know I've had this experience. I've told this story on the podcast multiple times, like going to wedding networking meetings, vendor networking meetings back in the day when I was shooting weddings. And you'd have multiple photographers in the room and they just get up and they kind of all say the same thing. I'm so-and-so photographer. I specialize in 5 different things, which was interesting. I haven't said this before, I don't think, but like they're commenting on family photography and dog photography and whatever the other photographies are. But they're at a
Mhm.
wedding networking meeting. Like the whole idea
Mhm.
is to sell yourself as a wedding photographer. They're talking about 5 different genres. They sit down, the next person gets up and does something similar. And so now they're just getting lost in the minds of these vendors who they
Mhm.
naturally should be wanting to sell to. So I
Right.
think there is significant advantage to focusing on a genre and then even niching down on that genre because it simplifies things for us. It simplifies things
Mhm.
for the potential client. And if we have an effective way to communicate a distinct brand position to them, even more powerful.
Right.
And you mentioned something, Clark, which I think is interesting, and it's another way to think about what a brand position or brand position statement is: elevator pitch. The
Mhm.
caveat is elevator pitch. You think about an elevator ride; it's going to be 15 seconds, maybe 30 seconds long. We don't have in 2023 15 seconds to talk about ourselves, or certainly not 30 seconds to
Mhm.
talk about ourselves. People's attention spans are shorter, generally speaking.
Oh,
So
definitely.
the goal, and we'll talk about more about this, but the goal is to be able to communicate a brand position statement in about 3 seconds, and with 5 to 10 words at most. That would be the goal, especially keeping in mind people's attention spans. What would you
Mhm.
say about your senior photography is unique to the marketplace or places that you're working in?
To me, I mean, it's just visually. I mean, a lot of people will say, well, it looks different than what we see. And I photograph using a studio light outdoors probably 95% of the time.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm not here, I'm not going to I don't bash nobody. I mean, there's people in our local market that they're all mostly natural light photographers,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of them do it really well. I mean, I've done it before too. When you find good natural light, you want to use it.
Yeah.
But one of the things I like to say about myself is if we get somewhere and the lighting situation is horrible, I'm going to make it not horrible. And I've done that so long, it's just second nature. It's like when you get in the car and you start your car up and you put it in gear and you turn the turn signals on and all that kind of stuff. You don't think about it. And that's kind of how I am with off camera lighting. It's like I turn it all on and I'm ready to go. So it's that's one thing that differentiates me here locally, and also my pricing, which I don't go and look at everybody's stuff all the time. And I used to let that bog me down and worry about, oh my gosh, so and so's doing this, so and so's doing that, and I've gotten to where now I don't even think about that. I like to do what I'm doing, and people come to me because they want something different and they're going to get something different from me. And a lot of that also comes down to what products that I provide too,
Mm.
because the majority of the photographers that are local to me do primarily digitals, and which is, not, there's nothing wrong with that. There's clients that's what they want, and I provide it as well, but I also primarily provide uh, prints and albums and canvas and wall art. And there's a lot of clients that come to me because that's what they want, because they know I provide it, they get it, they're ready to, it comes to them ready to go. So,
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up, and I think it's important that you bring up the significance of your technical ability with lighting. And again, for anybody who hasn't seen it, go to clarksandersphotography.com. Clark is practicing what he preaches here. He's not just running his mouth. It's truly beautiful stuff when it comes to the light.
Thank you.
As much time as I spent as a wedding photographer, 10 plus years, and certainly worked on my lighting skills and different styles of lighting, I never quite developed that skill that you've got, Clark, and it's definitely enviable. The caveat to that conversation is, again, something that I already alluded to, which is that trying to communicate that skill set to a potential client who doesn't know anything about photography, doesn't understand the technical side, doesn't care to understand the technical side. Imagine if you went to the Mac store and the person trying to sell you on the Mac started talking about how they built the various components of the Mac and what the significance of all those different pieces are. You're like, I don't care. I just want a computer.
I know.
And yet so many photographers, exactly. But so many photographers still tend to communicate like they're talking to photographers, not like they're talking to a potential client who doesn't care about all the stuff that photographers enjoy and care about. And there's nothing wrong with liking those things. We just have to distinguish between who we're talking to. Is it a photographer we're talking to? Are we talking to a potential client who doesn't understand all the terminology and the technical side, doesn't have the artist mindset? We need to think about who we're talking to and use the appropriate language. So I say all that to say, you could easily sell somebody on the technical side of your photography because you have the skill set, but it's not, generally speaking, it's not a relevant conversation to 99% of potential, especially high school senior clients. They're like, I don't care. So the question then is how you can communicate effectively in a way that resonates with the potential client, what it is that you do. If there's some other way to communicate the significance of your lighting skill in a way that resonates with that potential client, then that might be a good direction to go. And I actually want to come back to what you said about cinematic high school senior portrait photography, because I think there's something there, but we'll come back to that in just a little bit. I want to get just a little bit more context for the sake of the conversation. What would you say? We talked about customers' pain points or what would meet their needs. What are your target customers' biggest pain points based on your interaction with them?
I'm not sure necessarily what their pain points would be, other than, some of them they're definitely wanting digital. Some of them say they only want digitals and they don't really know why they want them. And most of the time it's just because they want them for social media.
Okay.
And so I try to, not totally I'm not a pushy salesperson, but I always try to remember to carry sample albums with me so I can show them, here's what you're going to get. Because, there's going to be a lot of photos. Nobody's going to want to have just a bunch of loose prints out. This is a great way to display what I'm going to be creating for you. Being able to get their favorite images like that. Yeah. But I think some of the pain points is, and I don't think some of them really realize what it is. And when you're there, it's like, okay. And I ask myself this all the time. It's like, when I go somewhere, do I want to take my big camera, or is my phone just fine? Yeah. What am I going to do with what am I going to do with what I'm creating? And a lot of times that's a question a lot of my senior clients and other people's senior clients, they just, we need to have these pictures made, but they don't really understand why. So when there's a solution presented to them, here's what you can do with it, then they're like, oh, okay, that makes more sense. So, well, yeah. But I think that, to me, that's the only thing I can think of as far as maybe a pain point would be.
Okay. I was going to say pain point may not be the right phrase for me to use in this case. What are their needs, their desires? It's sometimes, like you said, clients don't actually know what they want, but a good brand and a strong marketing company understands what the target client's interests are. And they're able to cater to that, even if those potential clients are not telling them. They know just based on market research and some conversation what those desires, what those needs are, and they can market accordingly to them. So that's something interesting to think about. And it could be something as simple as, you think about family photography. This is a relatively easy one to go to, but think about family portraits, especially those that involve younger kids, and how just chaotic and stressful that can be. A very easy go-to with the so-called pain point would be to say that I'm a family portrait photographer that makes family portraits easy again. or something to that effect. In that the experience that the mom, the dad, or both are preparing for and getting their kids wrangled up and dressed up and taken to wherever they need to go for the portrait session, that they don't have to be so stressed about making sure everything is so perfect, because Nathan Holritz is going to just make it so easy for us. We're going to be in and out in 30 minutes. The kids are going to have fun. Nobody's going to be yelling at each other and stressed out and crying and screaming. It's just going to be fun. And look at the stunning portraits that he can get from this really fun experience.
Right.
Now I'm speaking to, and I don't have to ask them if that's a stress point, because I know as a parent what it could be like. I know as a kid growing up in a family where my dad prioritized going to these family portrait studios, and we were so annoyed at the process. Like, I understand what the pain point is, so I can just speak to that because I know it's something that carries significance for that potential client. So understanding that stuff is good. You mentioned the digital files. Do you provide digital files as part of the experience?
I do. I have a combo collection, and then I also have just digitals only if they want just digitals.
Cool.
But when you said that, I think some of the pain points that people come to me with is they come expecting that they have to have all the ideas for the session. We don't know what to do. We have no clue what to do. And I thought, don't worry about that. You know, they don't know what clothes to bring or whatever. So just bring what you want to bring. Just bring several things. You know, we may, depending on the session time, we may shoot 3 or 4.
Cool.
But I said, just bring what you want to bring, and then we can go through it when they get there. Because if they're coming to me and I'm shooting around where we live, I know all the locations, and I thought, okay, this outfit will work great at this little spot. This one will work there. So kind of a lot of them worry about clothing options or posing options and all these different ideas. And then some do not have it at all. They come totally prepared. Here's a pose. We really like this one. Can you make this happen? Or they'll see another, photo that someone's done and want that recreated. So
cool.
But a lot of it is having their own thing.
You'll see me looking down here. I'm actually taking notes on a notebook here as you're talking with some ideas, because I like that idea of making it easy for, I mean, it's similar to what we were talking about with family portrait photography, but especially with seniors. We have to think about the fact, and I know you're a parent, Clark, so this will resonate with you. My kids, my daughter is now a freshman in college. My son's a senior. So I've been through this stage too. But like the idea of, I mean, there's something that we might want for their senior pictures, and then there's something that the senior is going to want for their senior pictures. And it may not necessarily line up. So that there's the potential stressor of that as well. So the idea that neither the senior nor the parent has to think too much about it. Bring some clothes that you like to wear. We're going to have some options here for you. I'm going to make this process easy for you again. And so we'll come back to this, but like a position statement that is something as simple as making senior portrait photography easy again, and leading with something like that. If that really is truly a focus, like the experience that you provide for your client it truly backs up that statement. We're not here just to write interesting words. We're here to actually communicate what the experience provides. And if that's really something that you put a lot of focus on, and we'll of course talk about this in a little bit, but looking at your marketplace that you're based in, your competition, literally nobody's talking about that. You might be in an interesting position to be able to lead with that and then create a whole experience based around that. And that might be a possibility. So we'll come back to that.
Okay.
Just 1 or 2 more questions here. We've kind of given this away at this point, I think, but are you at a stage right now where you're lacking a brand position statement, or you want to refine an existing brand position statement? Where are you at in this process?
Well, it's one that I don't think about it really. I used to, when I would post like anything on social media, I've had something in my phone on my notes. I'd just copy paste everything. And it was, I've got it written down somewhere. It's like senior portraits with a cinematic flair for clients who truly value, I forget the rest of it, but I had it worded where whatever I'm doing something that's got a look to it that is more, I don't know if you'd say methodical, but I mean, it's just when you go, I mean, I'll watch movies over and over again, and I'm like drawn into, oh my gosh, the lighting looks so cool on that, And there's a lot of clients when they see a photo that I've taken that said, the lighting on that looks so good. Yeah. And you just can't get that with pointing a camera at somebody, Yep. I'll have people, I always tell them all the time, because I forget to do behind the scenes photos. I said, if you're doing photos, send them to me. I said, I don't want to sound like I'm being a narcissist or anything, but I like to share those when I'm posting the images that I create, because when someone takes a photo with their phone, that's what we're seeing with our eyes. But what I'm creating with my studio light and my camera is a totally different outcome. And it's kind of fun to show that that difference there, because it is a totally different look. And so that's one of the things that I try to bring to my sessions is like I said, natural light's good and all. And there's some people that don't care. They know, hey, we just want pictures. We don't care what they look like. And a big time thing about certain people, it's price driven too. So they don't want to spend a lot of money. So they're going to use who they can get the most photos for and spend the least amount with. So, but I try to make my images and anything, I don't want it to sound like when they're coming to me, it's going to be cheap.
Okay.
When I say a lot of times when people say there's value to it, to me, sometimes that's like, okay, I think of Walmart and the Great Value brand. It's like, you're wanting something cheaper. And it's like, I work my pricing where it filters out clients that are just price shopping. They want something good, and they don't mind paying extra for that. So
yeah, well, and I like, actually, and I'll share this for anybody who's watching. Oop. Whoa.
Oh, is it okay?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can hear you.
There was some weird technical glitch here. That was really weird. Hold on one second. Let me try this again.
Okay.
Okay, there we go. Can you still hear me?
Okay, there. Yeah.
Okay.
I can still hear you.
That was really weird. Okay, so forgive those of you who aren't watching the live stream. I must have hit a wrong button here, but I've got a whole control panel in front of me. Nobody can see. But I was pulling up Clark's website, and I love that Clark actually posts his prices. It's actually on the homepage too, immediately setting expectations about the price point. I don't really get any more. In fact, it becomes highly frustrating. I literally just had this experience in the last few days looking for a service for one of my companies where I had to set up a call or send an email in order to get pricing from this company. They didn't just post it. They gave it kind of introductory, and then for more information, contact us. And then I have to fill out this whole form, and I got to wait to get this thing back. And it's just so annoying, Clark. I don't know if you've had that experience, but I'm like, just give me the prices. There's literally, I understand the argument might be, well, if I get you on the phone, I can try to sell you. But most people these days are not in the mental space for that. They want to get the information, make a decision, and move on. And we need to make it easy for them. So I like that you lead with the prices on your site, clarksandersphotography.com, for anybody who's missed that. And I just had it up on screen. But they know immediately what your starting price point is and where the prices go from there. And so you've set that expectation up front, which is good. I think that's really important.
And once they see that, I mean, I've gone back and forth with whether or not to do that, because you hear arguments on both sides of the fence about it, like you just said. And to me, it's like, once they are interested in it, and the way I've got it, I've built in the session fee it covers my time, but then they're paying, basically, there's a deposit built into that thing. So if I'm spending a lot of time with them, I'm making sure I'm getting a minimum amount of money, that's going to be applied toward their final order. So up front, I'm getting that all up front. And then once they're serious about it, I've got you can't go to it from my site as a hidden link, but I have my pricing and everything for prints, digitals, everything I offer, it's there. I send that to them after we've had a conversation and they're, wanting a book. So.
Cool. Well, just something for everybody to kind of keep in mind in this process. But I want to go ahead, Clark, and dig into a few more ideas behind brand position, and then kind of to walk through where you're at and where you might be able to go from here. Because this is an interesting thing about this conversation, is you have established a strong brand. So we're not talking about how do you establish a strong brand per se, as much as just how do you effectively communicate that with words, especially for the sake of SEO and online presence. How do you effectively communicate what it is that you're offering to those who aren't getting referred to you via word of mouth, who are landing your site and don't have the context of some pre-existing relationship or connection to you, they're seeing your site for the first time, they're seeing your social media for the first time, and they're like, why should I use Clark? His photography is nice, but I looked at 5 other photographers and their photography is nice in my eyes too. Why do I use Clark specifically? So we're gonna talk about how to kind of create that. And really there are 4 different ways, Clark. The way that I've framed this, there's 4 different ways to establish a clear and distinct brand position. The first one is to be the first to offer a service. And clearly this is a difficult one because at this point, as we've talked about, there are a lot of photographers in the marketplace who are pretty much covering all the genres, unless we're in a really tiny market. And even then, I mean, you've talked about the fact that you're in a small market. I'm still looking around you and there are other photographers offering senior photography. So being the first to offer a service in this case is an irrelevant choice, but it has to at least be put out there. We can look for that as an opportunity. The second way to establish a clear and distinct brand position is to be the first to own a service. And this is a bit nuanced, but the example that I would give in this case is there may be plenty of people. I live in the Chattanooga, Tennessee area, and Chattanooga is saying that they're wedding photographers. But if I come out and say I am Chattanooga's premier wedding photography experience, that's easy for me to say. So that again, it's nuanced, and there's a massive caveat here, which is that I have to actually back that up. I mean, literally from the consult to conversations, to following communication, to the experience that I provide for the engagement session, that I provide for on the wedding day itself, the way that I deliver the photos after the fact, the viewing experience. I mean, the whole thing, fancy water, gifts along the way, dinners. I mean, like I need to up the ante. But if I want to truly be like, if when people think about wedding photography, they immediately think about Holritz photography because that is the premier, that's the ultimate, that's the gold standard, that's the Rolls Royce or the Ferrari, if you will, of wedding photography in Chattanooga. I can do that, but I have to make sure to actually back that experience up, or then it's just going to be empty words and not powerful enough. But again, I want to throw that out there as a possibility for anybody who's kind of considering doing that, especially in a smaller market where nobody's really owning a particular space.
Right.
Probably the most common opportunity, though, is number 3, which is to offer a unique variation on a service. So you're a senior photographer, Clark. You could say I am, and honestly, at this point, we'll talk about this a little bit more. Just for the sake of SEO, if you just led with the fact that you are a senior photographer in Arkansas, some variation of those words on your site, that in and of itself would bring value to your presence online, to Google's recognition of you as a senior photographer in Arkansas. That needs to happen. We'll talk about that. But that is not a unique variation on the service. So the question then is, what unique variation on the service do you offer? The example I gave earlier, black and white wedding photography for Chattanooga skateboarders. I know there's nobody in Chattanooga who only shoots weddings in black and white. So just the black and white portion of that, if I'd led with that, that would be a unique variation on the service. The service is wedding photography. The variation is black and white photography. And I could do that and I would immediately stand out because there'd be nobody else doing that. I go to a bridal show, everybody has their booth set up with these pretty colors and film presets and whatever. And mine's all black and white, and I have a black and white booth, and I'm wearing my black t-shirt as I always do, and everything's in black and white. Boom, I grab people's attention because immediately I have a unique variation on the service that's gonna stand out just because it's different. So that's the most, I think, common opportunity for any photographer in any market, is to look for an opportunity to offer unique variation on a service. I want to come back to your tendency toward that cinematic senior portrait photography, because I think there's actually quite a bit of value there as I'm thinking about it more. We'll come back to that. And then the fourth way to establish a clear and distinct brand position is to offer the service to a specific market segment. So I could say I'm a to use my earlier example, I could say I'm a wedding photographer, but I could also say I am a wedding photographer for Chattanooga skateboarders. Now I'm speaking to a particular market segment, which is Chattanooga, Tennessee. I'm not just selling it to the state or to the region, Chattanooga. And I'm specifically marketing to skateboarders who live in Chattanooga. Now, the caveat to this whole thing is that's super niche. That may not be a big enough marketplace to sustain my financial goals, right? So I may have to expand that. Maybe I am black and white wedding photography for, Tennessee skateboarders. And now I've expanded my marketplace, and there are enough skateboarders in Tennessee who are going to get married who want black and white wedding photography. And now I have a potential business because it's so unique. And if I do it really, really well, then there's an interesting opportunity there. But we all have to consider how big the market, as we niche down, is that market big enough to sustain the financial goals that we have as a business owner? That's super important to keep in mind. So those are kind of the four ways to go about that. Any questions or comments on those ideas? Okay, cool. Yeah. So let me just keep moving then too here, just to stay aware of time. So then, of course, the progression in this conversation naturally. And by the way, for anybody listening in or live streaming, don't hesitate to comment or ask questions as we go here. But the question then is, okay, Nate, I understand what brand position is. I understand the significance of brand position. You're starting to break these concepts down a little bit more. I get it. How do I go about establishing that brand position? The first is to establish a big picture view. And that is part of what I was doing, Clark, and asking you those questions. And for anybody listening in, asking yourself these questions for the sake of understanding where you're coming from and then ultimately where you want to go. For me, a big picture view also includes the financial goals, which I just alluded to. Like in the span of a year, I know what my bills are. So I know what my financial needs are. I know what my financial goals are, how much I want to save. So I need to make sure that I'm establishing a business model that is going to support those financial needs and goals in the short term, in the long term. That's part of that big picture view as well. So I need to be clear about my big picture view, how much I want to make and how much time I want to spend making that money. And then I also understand where my heart's at, like what I like about photography, what genres I want to be involved in. And so those things are going to drive the direction that I want to go. If it comes from a deeper place like that, then my business will be much more sustainable over the long run. But that's, I think, where a lot of photographers, or some variation is that, where a lot of photographers stop. They know what they feel, and they're so passionate about fill in the blank, and that's how they base the beginning of their business, or the decisions about the beginning of their business, but they don't do a lot of market research. And I think that's the next important stuff, is to study the market. And studying the market's actually super easy. It's like Google. I've got this really cool thing. It's called Google. I go to Google. And what I actually did with you, Clark, is I just went in and I typed in, the first search that I did actually was senior portraits, Highland, Arkansas. Of course, based on the market that you're working in. And a very similar search, senior pictures, Highland, Arkansas. And what I'm doing for everybody listening in, and for Clark, for you as well, what I'm doing here is I'm doing that Google search, and I'm going to look through the first 3 to 4 pages of organic results that pop up. And I say organic because somebody can easily pay to be at the top, and it wouldn't hurt to look there. I don't want to click on somebody's paid ad because I don't want to cost the photographer some money in my so-called research. But type it in manually if you need to. But I'm going to look at the first 3 to 4 pages of results on Google when I type in that search. I'm based in Chattanooga, Tennessee. If I want to get back in wedding photography, Chattanooga wedding photographer, or Chattanooga wedding photography. And by the way, when you start to type that in, for anybody listening in, you'll see Google starts to fill in the rest of the phrase for you based on what is most popular. So go with what they suggest, hit enter, and then look at the first 3 to 4 pages of results. And what I'm looking at, Clark, is I'm doing thorough market research for myself. I'm going to look not just at whether or not they have a brand position. Most photographers don't, or if they do, it's not a very strong one. A brand position statement, rather. I'm looking at the services that they're offering to see if there's maybe a hole in the market that needs to be filled. Like, we have all these photographers shooting weddings, but there's only 2 senior photographers. Looks like I should maybe go in the direction where there's not a lot of senior photography need being met. I'm looking at prices that are being charged. It's nice to talk about charging higher prices, but if 75% of the senior portrait photographers in the marketplace are charging $1,000 for a portrait session, just to use a simple example, but there are only 2 that are charging, $300 or $500, I might have to shoot a little bit more volume, but I'd actually be going into a segment of the market that is underserved. And so the opportunity might actually be a lot larger in that. So I'm looking at the potential brand position, if there is any, brand position statement, the services being offered. I'm looking at the prices being charged. And I just want to develop some semblance of what other photographers in my marketplace are doing. Because again, this brand position statement that I'm coming up with is not just random. I'm not making up pretty words that I think are cute and creative. And or the thing that was really popular for a while, I don't know if you remember this, it was like, you had to come up with 3 things about your brand. It's like, I'm cute, joyful, and fun. Or I'm creative, da-da, da-da. Like, it was like 3, you were supposed to say 3 different things. it didn't really carry any significance because most of the time photographers just coming up with some cute words that didn't really actually translate to the experience that they were creating, or didn't, if nothing else, didn't actually add value to the marketplace that they were speaking to. Do you remember seeing any of that?
Yeah.
It became popular for a while. Again, I don't think it adds a lot of value to the marketplace at a deeper level. So on that note, what I did, Clark, was that search that I just mentioned, and I looked to see what other photographers, senior photographers in particular, there are in that general marketplace. And if there are any brand position statements, what statements come up. And these, of course, I'm not going to mention business names, but these are the statements that came up in those searches. One was Arkansas wedding photographer for couples who cherish experiences. Now, this is interesting because that was from a search for senior photographers in your marketplace.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That was the person's website that came up, and that is the position statement on the homepage of their site. Just to be clear, sometimes when you do a search, a more relevant page from somebody's site will pop up in the search results. But if I go to the homepage of that particular photographer's website, that's what's coming up. So in this case, they were actually more focused on wedding photography, but they'd done well enough in SEO that they popped up in the senior results. The next option or result that came up, photographs are my jam, shooting happy photos everywhere. Those very vague statements to make, just to be clear to everybody listening in. It doesn't offer a clear value proposition. The photographer's just really talking about themselves, and that doesn't nobody any good. But they did follow up with something that I thought was a little bit more effective, which was, this was on, I think, a different page. They said unique senior photographs. They don't talk about why they're unique, so that falls short a bit. But it says unique senior photographs for you, your mom, and your Instagram too, which is kind of fun because it speaks to what we were saying earlier, like the difference in interest between the senior and the parent. And of course, the senior is interested in what they can post to social media. So they were actually speaking to that. There was some value to that. That was interesting. Another one that popped up was, again, a wedding photographer, interestingly enough, Northwest Arkansas wedding photographer. We capture authentic moments and epic portraits. Little side note for everybody listening in, authentic, way overused, carries no real meaning or significance. Simon that I mentioned was on the podcast just recently. He said a phrase the other day. He said, it means everything and nothing. And I think that's a good description of authentic. Everybody says it, and I don't know what it actually means. Like, it carries so little significance anymore because everybody says it. Let's stop overusing words that don't have any real meaning. But we capture authentic moments and epic portraits, Northwest Arkansas high school senior photography. I think that was maybe on a different page.
Yeah.
Senior
and that's in a totally different quadrant of the state.
Right. So, again, interesting that this is coming up when I'm searching under Highland, right? Senior photography, but more, this was, I think, again, this was on a different page. Senior photography, but more bold, more modern, more epic. And yeah, this was on the senior page on that same site that talked about wedding photography. Again, another example of using words here that don't have any objective meaning. They're not clear enough. What does bold mean? I don't know what that means. Like, bold's going to mean 15 different things to 15 different people. What does modern mean? Like, in the age where we were making the transition from wedding photography that was like stiff and boring and standing straight up and down in these really boring poses in front of the camera versus the photojournalistic style that became popular in the early 2000s, there was an opportunity at that point in the marketplace to say something like modern, and it might have carried some more relevance. But now I don't know what modern means. So we have to be super careful to use words that actually carry relevance to the current market environment. And then the last one that I saw under that search result was, these are the moments that matter the most. It sounds cute. It carries some significant, it's touchy-feely. Again, nothing wrong with that, but I still don't know how this photographer is going to add value to my life. Yes, the moments matter most. Yeah, my high school senior is about to graduate and go off to college. It's a big moment. But what does that mean about the photography I'm going to get from you, right?
Right.
Anyway, I'm reading this, by the way, Clark, for your awareness and context. And of course, for everybody listening in, it's good to do this kind of market research before you go decide on a brand position statement, because you want to develop market awareness to position yourself against the marketplace. We might be theoretically friends with all of our photography community, everybody singing Kumbaya, and that's great. But our potential clients, they're not thinking about it that way. They're still making a decision at the end, and we have to distinguish ourselves. Last kind of observation, I did a further search just for senior pictures, Arkansas. And this was a kind of a popular search based on what Google was suggesting, Clark. Arkansas wedding photographer for couples who cherish experiences. I think maybe that came up earlier as well. Celebrating the life you've created with portraits you're proud of. okay, it's a bit vague, but because I still don't know what I'm getting from you as a photographer that is unique. But these are the moments that matter the most. Again, that same photographer popped up, senior photographer based in Russellville, Arkansas. Okay, that's logical information, but why do I want to use you? That wasn't communicated effectively. Wedding and lifestyle photographer was another one. Another one was we make images that help you, your organization, or your brand tell your story. Odd that senior photography was on that site with that kind of position statement, but okay. And then the last one, I love bright images with tons of natural light and just capturing the pure joy of life in front of my camera. I love creating natural, timeless images that celebrate the joy of your senior year. Notice this is a really good example and a reminder for all of us as photography industry specialists to keep in mind. This particular photographer is talking endlessly about themselves and what they like. They're really sharing little to no value to the potential client. Right. What is the value proposition? What is the unique value proposition? And that right there is what should be more important. But again, photographers have a tendency of talking about themselves and what they like so much. And I think the thought process, and Clark, you might remember this too, talking about going back to early 2000s, like there was this transition period in the industry where photography was more just this kind of like you were a professional photographers of America certified, awarded photographer, and you technically knew how to take a good picture, and you showed up and you did the thing and you went back home. But there was little to no personality involved. And there was a transition that happened around 2005 and maybe just a little bit beyond, where photography started to become more personal and photographers started to put their personal brands out there. And I think that was good, but we've gone to this extreme where we're talking about ourselves rather than how we add value to the potential client's life. And I think that's what's missing. And this is a good example of that. Any thoughts on that? Just being in the industry as long as you've been?
Yeah, I think it just, you've got to meet needs of the people that are coming to you, that they know what they want. They know what their kid is like, and they want somebody that's going to mesh well with their personalities too. I think there's a big part of it, because there's people coming to me and there's like, they do mostly boys. They don't want to have their senior portraits made. And I tell mothers most of the time, they're the ones coming with them, that once we're finished, if they leave and they had a good time and it wasn't as bad of an experience as they thought it was going to be, then I did my job, Okay. And I got them some great, what I love to do is when I know that's what the situation is, and I start showing them the photos when we're doing them, and they come alive and they're like, oh, this is fun. That to me that's just worth it all. And that's when you have a client that comes to you and they're like worried to death that, okay, this is going to be miserable. These pictures are going to be horrible because he doesn't want to do this. He doesn't want to be there. And you can help with that, It's almost like a therapy session.
Yeah. Well, but there again, you're aware of what matters to the potential clients. And to your point, speaking to those needs, that's where the value is, versus, in very stark contrast to that phrase that I just read from that photographer's site, where they're just endlessly talking about themselves. You're absolutely right that part of the effort in that transition in the industry was to not just create a personal brand, but to make themselves as photographers more personal to the potential client. So there's some level of connection, which then enables more, hopefully emotionally vulnerable portraits. Win-win. And theoretically, yes, absolutely a win-win. The problem again is that, like a lot of things in our culture, we went to an extreme, and there's got to be a bit more of a balance in the process. So by all means, be personable, be kind, be friendly, put some information out there about yourself as a photographer, maybe on an About Me section. But a lot of photographers are making that a prominent part of the homepage of the site and not really prioritizing communicating the unique value proposition. And I just think there needs to be a bit more emphasis there. By the way, I will say, and I should have mentioned this outset, you probably know this, but in that search for Highland, Arkansas senior photographer, you came up first and second and third and fourth and fifth in the search results. Your Facebook page, your Instagram, your website, you're very well present online. So props to you for that.
Thank you.
But
well, you had mentioned earlier about through PPA. I'm a member of PPA. Yeah. And they have their certification stuff and all that kind of things. I have that. I did it back in 2013. And I did it mainly because I did not go to college, and I wanted something to kind of fill that void in my own personal self.
Yeah.
But I've told plenty of people, I've never booked a client because of it. Nobody's searched. I want to come to a photographer that's a certified professional photographer
Yeah.
that's got all these awards. I want to go to this award-winning photographer, or whatever.
Yeah.
That's never happened.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. I have stuff like that. I think I have it on my website about it, and I've made a post about it on my business page in Facebook the other day. But it's more of a self-esteem thing for myself.
Mm-hmm.
But not many clients, they don't know what that is. They don't know who PPA is. I mean, a lot of photographers do. I mean, they're good. It's a good organization to be part of because you got some good insurance there.
Well, yeah, good insurance. And to your point, there's an opportunity for individual photographers to challenge their technical abilities through that education. I have to be, I know I get a little bit blunt, if you will, about this conversation about what matters to the client versus what matters to the photographer. I don't want to take anything away from what matters to the photographer. We're in this business because we like it. There's certain things we like about it, and it's natural to want to talk about those things. But you're absolutely right, Clark. And I was actually president of the local PPA guild here for a number of years ago, and was part of the local guild for some time. And I've spoken at PPA as well. I know the organization quite well. And there's certainly plenty of opportunity there for us as photographers to be able to further ourselves in our craft. And I think that's where a lot of the value lies, certainly in their insurance as well, but and even their legal services. But to then take that and try to promote that to a potential client just carries little to no value these days. It'd be like, because I know going to the PPA conferences, one of the things that always amused me was watching photographers walk around with their medals around their neck as I'm walking the trade show conference floor. And you just think about how little value that actually holds in the world at large. They may feel good about themselves on the trade show floor walking around amongst other photographers, but it just unfortunately carries so little value to the potential client. So just distinguishing between what matters to us versus what matters to the client, super, super important. Got some comments actually from Kevius. He was saying, strategize the industry to set up the infrastructure of your business and how to provide a resolution to the client's problem. Great topic today. And I appreciate you commenting on that. And then he also says, and just because the industry isn't doing your new idea doesn't mean that you defer from it. If it provides value and resolution, swing the bat. Yeah, and really that's what it comes down to. Absolutely. Look where the opportunity to lend value is. And by doing the market research, we can make that decision logically, objectively, rather than just making up a phrase and going a particular direction because we feel like it. I think that's really important. So just to kind of close the conversation, Clark, or try to bring it to a close here. There are a couple of things that I want to take a look at here. We first want to think about the brand position statement. And as we're reading through those various brand position statements, if we can even call them that, from other photographers in the market, by the way, in fact, probably, 50% or even more of the websites that I pulled up, because I probably looked through, between those different searches, I probably looked through at least 20 to 30 different websites to see what other photographers were saying in that Arkansas marketplace. And probably at least 50% of those didn't even have any kind of brand position statement, maybe even more. And then the ones that did, most cases, just didn't really communicate a whole lot of value. That's good for you because it's a lot easier for you now to come up with a unique brand position statement that you are basing your whole business model around. I will also say, again, based on just looking at other photographers' work, that nobody else is offering the photographic style that you are. Now, that matters because you told me prior to our conversation today that if you had any kind of so-called brand position statement, you said cinematic inspired high school senior portraits. That was kind of that's how you would sum it up. And initially my thought was, well, cinematic, like what does that actually mean? Yeah. Is it too vague a word to use for somebody to understand what it means? But I think paired with, because you made more than one time today, you made the point that the style that you're photographing in with the lighting style, with the lighting that you're using, it really does provide a cinematic element. Like when I think about how I learned lighting for photography, a lot of it was based around watching TV shows and movies and applying the lighting that I was seeing in those TV shows and movies in my photography. And
Right.
absolutely yours does that very thing. So I think pairing cinematic senior, I would take inspired out of the way. I would just say cinematic high school senior portraits, or you could say cinematic high school senior portraits for Arkansas seniors. Or you could throw in Arkansas high school senior portraits. So cinematic Arkansas high school. Fitting, you have the service, which is the senior portrait photography, the cinematic, which is the variation on that service. And I'll come back to that here in just a second and how to ultimately implement that. You're speaking to the market that you're in. I know that you're used to working within an hour or two of where you live, but for the sake of kind of longevity of the brand and maximizing the amount of opportunity that you have, and especially if people are willing to travel to you, you wouldn't even have to travel. Putting a wider blanket out there, or blanket's not the word, a wider, what's the net? I don't know why I said blanket, wider net. To try to bring in more potential clients, or at least expose them to your brand, I think is a really good way to go. So I would suggest, only because it doesn't seem like you've got a whole lot of great competition, not to take away from any existing Arkansas photographers, but the competition level isn't super high. I think there's an opportunity to widen that net a bit, and market to the state more broadly than just to your local marketplace. So a potential statement here might be something as simple as cinematic high school senior portraits for Arkansas seniors, or cinematic, cinematic high school. I actually wrote another one down earlier, cinematic senior portraits for Arkansas high school seniors. It's a little bit more of a mouthful. You can kind of decide on what works best, or maybe even run kind of an A/B test to see what gets more searches or more clicks. But some variation on that, I think, is a really great place to start. And then here's the key. I was actually, and let me pull up your website, because I noticed earlier, in fact, what might be really cool is we could pull this up in Photoshop and mock it up. But I'm gonna pull this up here. Let's see. Okay. So when I think about a cinematic style of portrait, I naturally go to a landscape format, because that's how we watch cinema. That's how we watch video. The cool thing about a going the horizontal format, at least for the banner image on your site, when somebody lands on your site and they see an image that looks like this, for anybody not watching the live stream or watching the video, this is a landscape format image of a male senior who's standing with his truck in the background, a very dramatic colored sky, beautiful. One of the advantages to a shot like this, especially having the subject in the right-hand third, is that you then have some negative space in the left-hand side, or middle and left-hand side, to put text, your brand position statement. And you could literally, I won't do it right now for time's sake, but you could literally put that position statement here in the space, here where the sky is, or because the truck is so dark, you could just use white text and write that position statement in big, bold font right there. And it could be something to the effect of what we said earlier. What was it? Cinematic high school senior portraits for Arkansas seniors, or something to that effect. That could be your position statement, and it goes right there. So the moment that the key here, and I failed to mention this earlier, but like as far as next steps are concerned, like how do we go about communicating that brand position, is one, to choose the position. I think you've got a pretty clear position here. Refine the messaging, and I think we've distilled it down to a relatively few number of words. Even that long one that I shared earlier, cinematic senior portraits for Arkansas high school seniors, still only 8 words, which is great. Refine the messaging, and then share your position prominently is kind of the next step in that process. And right now, if I go to your site, when somebody first lands on your site, they're getting hit with a lot of beautiful imagery, but they don't know what they're getting. And they might be able to guess that you're a senior photographer, but even if they're able to guess it, there's no communication about what your brand position statement is. So I think there'd be a really good option here. And I'm aware of the company that you're using for your website too. I dug around a little bit. And I know they even offer an example. In fact, let me show you an example of this, because let's see if I've got this here. I saved the link. Yeah, here we go. Do you mind me mentioning the company that you're using for your templates?
No, I don't mind at all.
PhotoBiz is the company that Clark is using here. And one of their templates, Clark, you can see here, see how they have that. I mean, capturing love isn't a particularly powerful brand position statement, but you see how they've got the white text there, right, like front and center. So the moment somebody lands on the site, they're seeing that position statement. Now, you with your actual position statement, brand position statement, positioned, if you're going to have light, this is a little bit hard to see because they've got white text against a lighter background. You position that against an image that looks like that one that I pulled up a second ago, like this, and that text pops out. And you've got your position statement there. Of course, logo in the top left-hand corner, navigation's on the top right-hand side. Your position statement, big bold font there that matches your brand font. That stands out against the dark background, and that's the first thing that they see. Of course, it could be any number of images that are in the horizontal or landscape format that have some negative space that are either dark or light that allow you to put dark or light font against it to be able to see it clearly. But that would be your banner image. You have your position statement. By the way, an H1 heading, which we'll come to in a second for the sake of SEO, but that would immediately have a different kind of impact because now they immediately know what it is that you offer, what makes it distinct from other photographers. And then the last point that I was going to mention when it comes to effectively establishing a brand position is that in addition to positioning that message prominently, not just on your website, but then putting the statement on all your social media profiles as well, that you match the experience with the message. So it's super important. If you're going to run with something as specific as cinematic senior portrait photography, that the images match that. So you want these dramatic portraits, a lot of times probably landscape, they wouldn't all have to be, certainly for the banner image, that match this notion of cinematic style of photography. And I think it would just do a beautiful, beautiful job of communicating what it is that you're ultimately trying to accomplish. Clark, what do you think about that?
I love it.
Yeah?
And shooting in the horrors, that's one of my favorite ways to shoot.
Okay, cool.
Then I have to think about, okay, maybe a parent may want one vertical, so I've got to do both back and forth. But yeah.
Well, and I wish
the particular photo you had pulled up there of that kid with his truck.
Yeah.
Makes me, when I was doing the senior portraits, I felt so old because his parents are good friends of ours, and we were at the hospital the day he was born. So I was like,
no way.
I was like, oh Lordy, yeah. So it was like, dang, I'm old.
I know that feeling. I've been kind of going through that stage of my life as of late where I'm a little bit more cognizant of my age. I get that, but cool opportunity though too to be able to have that kind of relationship and provide that. Then, especially being in a smaller community too, I'm sure it encourages those opportunities. But nonetheless, here I'm glad that I thought through this position statement of cinematic senior portraits a bit more because I think. Because your work actually backs it up. It'd be one thing if you were saying that and then you just had kind of everybody else's senior portrait photography. But the way that you use dramatic lighting, I think that's the thing that enables you to be able to say that and then back it up. And so when they go through your website, if they land on your website first and the position statement is prominent there at the top with a beautiful landscape banner image, and then they scroll down, there's some text for the sake of SEO, and then they scroll down and there's more information beyond that. But all the images have that dramatic lighting, and you're so consistent with that everywhere on your site, everywhere on your social media. They're going to make sense of it. They're like, oh yeah, that looks like, this epic movie that I just saw the other day, whether it was in the cinema or on their TV screen, whatever it might be. But that will actually make more sense. And then having senior portrait photography and Arkansas, some variation of those words, on your site as well. Super important for SEO. And that's the other thing right now I was noticing too, if I can just point this out, we'll kind of finish up with this. So I use a little tool. I'm using Google Chrome. It's my go-to browser. It's a little bit resource intensive, but the plugins available for Chrome are great. And I like the overall user experience. But there's this tool called Detailed SEO Extension. It's a free plugin for anybody listening in. We've talked about it on the show before, but if I click on that, it gives me just a quick glance at what's going on from an SEO standpoint. And so I'm looking at the title here. The title is a bit short. That's why it's flagged red, Clark. And the description is also short. That's why it's flagged red. But there's an opportunity here for you to, so that the title, rather than it being the name of your business, could be your brand position statement. The description could be the opportunity for you to write some, or for that matter, your title could be your business name followed by the brand position statement. The description could be some further subtext that explains a bit more about, that gives more context to what that means. You could speak to dramatic lighting, and that, and your potential clients are going to be able to see that. That's not too technical a concept to understand. So you're giving context to the notion of being quote unquote cinematic by explaining that dramatic, beautiful senior portraits with dramatic lighting that will capture the attention of all your friends and family, or something to that effect. And those are all words that are everyday words that everybody understands. Your work is going to match that, so it'll be easy for them to understand. But you can build that into the description. And what they're suggesting is a range of 70 to 155 characters. Right now, you've got, I think, 38 for the title. A range of what is it? I think it's something around 65 characters, and you've got about half that. So expanding on that's important. The other thing too is looking at headings. You've probably heard H1 tags, H2 tags before. If you have, if you kind of rework the front page of your site and you come up with that brand position statement. In fact, let me show you an example of what this looks like. I'll go to Photographer's Edit here, and let me log out of WordPress. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to use that same tool, Detailed SEO Extension, and you'll see for the title, we have custom photo editing services, photo retouching services. So we're running with keywords there that play really well in SEO based on research that we've done. And then description, outsource custom photo editing to Photographer's Edit, custom wedding photo editing, portrait photo editing, and commercial photo editing. Again, we're using words that carry significance when it comes to SEO. And then for the headings, H1 tags, H2 tags, the H1 tag is our brand position statement, custom photo editing services for wedding and portrait photographers. And you can see that right there at the very top of the page. And that H1 tag is what Google is going to give most significance to when it comes to SEO, the copy that's on the website. So making an effort to utilize your position statement for the sake of that H1 tag is going to be really important, just to have a bit. I mean, you've done well in the search results for your local market, but I'm thinking this is going to be more helpful, add more value when it comes to being found on a broader scale in Arkansas in general, and being able to stand out in that realm. Having a position statement, something to the effect of cinematic senior portraits for Arkansas high school seniors, you're doing a combination of things. Again, you're communicating the service, the variation on that service. So you have a value proposition or a distinct value proposition, but you're also speaking to the marketplace that you're wanting to work in, Arkansas and high school seniors, your target market within that locale. It does everything and also uses words that are important for the sake of SEO when it comes to senior portrait photography. That's your brand position statement, but it also plays really well in SEO. It becomes your H1 tag. And so I think it would do your online presence in the broader Arkansas marketplace a lot of good if you make some updates to those things. I would do that. I would make those updates and lead with a few larger pictures rather than just having a whole homepage that is just pictures and pricing information.
Right.
I would focus on a few larger, more impactful that of course highlight that dramatic cinematic lighting that you're talking about. This picture of this cheerleader here is a great picture. I love the composition of it with the two buses and the leading lines, but it doesn't necessarily represent that cinematic lighting. So it's not that it's a bad picture. I would just tend to highlight the ones that have that more cinematic lighting. I mean, you get this stunning cinematic shot of the guy shooting the basketball, or I scroll down here to this football player, again, super cinematic lighting, you know, it looks like a dramatic locker room shot from a football movie. And so on and so forth. So I would focus on those and just use a few of them, add a lot more text for the sake of SEO. I know that's a massive topic in and of itself, and we're only just barely touching on it, but
I'll speak back to my website, PhotoBiz. They make it super easy. I mean, I can go log into my control area and pick a different template, and boom, and it's done.
Awesome.
So it's supposed to rain here all weekend, so I'm gonna be doing some work from the laptop.
You've got some homework to do. Okay, cool. Well, I think that's kind of a good. I know we went just a little bit long, but I hope that in some way the perspective, the conversation was helpful.
Definitely.
And I really think, again, that pairing of your stunning, truly cinematic style of portrait photography with that position statement, just to pick one at this point, cinematic senior portraits for Arkansas high school seniors, that combination right there is just, it's perfect. And you keep your imagery consistent on your website, on social media. You make sure that statement is everywhere. And of course, you utilize it for the sake of SEO. I think you're going to be a really solid place. You got a solid business. So not to take away what you're doing with your business and word of mouth marketing, but it will give you the opportunity to have an even stronger presence online. And I think that'll be really cool.
I always have the mindset of there's always room to improve no matter what,
Same.
I mean, every single year I've done this, I've made small changes to things, and I thought there's always a room to improve.
Oh, I think about this almost all the time with my podcasting skills as well. So I totally get that thought process. Well, I appreciate you making so much time today. I appreciate you being willing to kind of let us share this conversation with the audience at large as well. And for anybody listening in, we've done a lot of these brand position consultations. So all you have to do is go to marketplace.What and you can see additional episodes there. And of course, on all of the podcast players out there. Thanks everybody for listening in, for the comments. And thanks again, Clark. It was good.